Hello everyone, Phil here for KO Gaming, and welcome to the Hateful Truth Rebooted, where I bring you maximum truth and minimum bullshit regarding the latest game releases. Today we're going to be talking about a game that at its core is going to be divisive because it's the latest of a slew of what people are calling walking simulators. A game where primarily there's not a lot of interactivity in the gameplay, but primarily it's just you walking around while some kind of a narrative or story unfolds. The game we're talking about today is Firewatch, which I played on the PlayStation 4, and it's very important for me to mention that early because it's going to come into play later in this review. Firewatch opens up with a series of dialogue choices on the screen that are very reminiscent of almost one of those PC adventure games from the 1980s, and at first it kind of really throws you for a loop because you're like, what the heck am I doing? I thought that this was going to be a game where I'm out in the wilderness, but after about 10 minutes of really depressing story exposition, you take up the role of Henry, a 40-something male who is now out in this wilderness woodsy area and has been tasked with the job of manning a giant watchtower and looking for all kinds of things that may go wrong in the forest, primarily being a forest fire. You're completely isolated, meaning there are no humans around, and the only actual contact you have with the civilized world is with a woman named Delilah, who you're going to be talking with via a walkie-talkie. Graphically, I've heard a lot of criticism about Firewatch's visual style, but I actually enjoyed it. It's more of a cartoony take. It almost looks like if this were the world of Team Fortress 2, but those guys were thrown out into the wilderness, this is probably what it would look like. There's a lot of detail, but it's not too much in detail that it looks hyper-realistic. It's a little bit more of cartoony style, and I really enjoyed it. Some people apparently have taken issue with it, but I thought that it was fine for the game, and it was a pretty beautiful way to go through this cool wilderness and explore it for the very first time. Now, you can actually go about playing Firewatch in two primarily different ways. First, you could pretty much report anything that you find out in the wilderness to Delilah over your walkie-talkie, whether it's scratches on a tree, a lake, a river, beautiful scenery, or even maybe locating some other mischievous humans who may or may not endanger the forest by starting fires because they're not being very careful. Or you could literally go through the game and not talk to Delilah, which would totally kind of change up the vibe and make it feel a lot more isolationist. Being that I am a social human and I prefer human contact, I was actually interacting with Delilah for the length of my playthrough, which actually made the game feel really cool. It was like having a friend next to you who you could joke with and talk about personal stuff, and ultimately that's what happens in Firewatch. It doesn't only become walking around and observing nature, but talking with Delilah about your personal life, your problems with your family and your wife and her health and things like that. You learn a lot about Delilah as a person over the course of the game, and the joking, the dialogue, in my opinion, is the primary focus and actually one of the biggest positive things about the game. The characters are very sarcastic. Yes, there's swearing in this game. It's adult-oriented, and it really feels like two humans interacting and getting along and getting to know each other for the very first time while trying to avoid total isolation in this open wilderness. I can't imagine what this game would be like if you completely ignored Delilah, but I've actually heard that's an option as well. I just didn't opt for that one. Now, in your interactions with Delilah, you have to be a little bit careful, because if you end up being a little bit too defensive, if you accidentally insult her, she has the option to basically get pissed off and she won't talk to you for a limited amount of time. This only happened to me once during my playthrough, and quite honestly, I reached another critical point in the story right away and she started talking to me again, but I get the feeling that if you did this during a part where you're just kind of free roaming and she stopped talking to you, it could force isolation and change the gameplay. So I did like that a little bit of a take, and also some of the dialogue options that you have with her, whether or not you actually want to reveal personal things, were pretty interesting, and I'm actually curious if you did replay the game a different way, if it would come out differently. But for me, Delilah and I had a pretty platonic relationship with a little bit of flirting here or there, but it was ultimately pretty interesting, and the dialogue I really enjoyed. Now, ultimately, not only are you going to be wandering through this forest looking for issues such as fires and things to put out, there'll be other things that come up. The thing is, if I mention them, it's going to pretty much spoil the plot of the game, so I don't want to do that, especially because there is a mystery aspect about halfway through the game of, could there be other people out here with me? Who would it be? What's going on? There may even be a little bit of a supernatural kind of twist to it, but I don't want to spoil that, so all I'll tell you is this. Yes, at its premise, all you're doing is walking through a forest, but there are things that happen during the course of the story that will take you to different areas, that look different, that have different gameplay mechanics, that you will probably enjoy, unless you're really looking for massive amounts of robust gameplay, then you're going to be disappointed. I don't think that's the point of Firewatch. It's to tell a story and an ongoing narrative. Now, there are some interesting things that are optional that you can do, including finding some optional items and things that you can pick up and keep, which later on will show back in your watchtower at the end of a day, which is pretty cool to see. Oh wow, I went out the day before, I collected a bunch of things that I found, and here they are in my watchtower for me to see. In addition, there's actually a few options to do things that are related to your personal life. For example, there's a photo of yourself and your wife, which somehow ends up face down multiple times during the game, and you have the option to put it up or put it down. Does it affect the game? No. But actually having this happen gives you a choice, and almost, I would say, gives you kind of almost a psychological evaluation of if you were married to someone and you weren't with them, would you care about them? Would you be thinking about them all the time? And it almost seems like an interesting human experiment, watching someone play this game and see what their choices are during the playthrough, to see almost what kind of a person they would be, unless of course they're actively saying, I'm just going to be a dick to my family and doing these nasty things. But it's cool that those options are there, and it certainly makes it feel like this game has more of a human touch, even though it may just be something superficial added in to make it artificially feel like there's more to do in the game. It was appreciated, and I actually like those little touches. So let's talk positives and negatives of Firewatch. The positives, I really like the graphical style. I enjoyed the narrative. The dialogue between you and Delilah is really interesting. It's well written. The mystery aspect of the game, there is an ongoing kind of thriller thing going on of what is going on in this forest. Is there someone else out here with me? Definitely a positive, and it actually kept me hooked for about the 5.5 gameplay hours that I played Firewatch, taking my time, wandering around, looking around for clues and things, and trying to really enjoy all the environments and everything. I really enjoyed the game, and I thought that that was well done. But there is a list of negatives that absolutely has to be called out when it comes to Firewatch. Number one, I'll be honest with everyone, and this might be a spoiler, but you need to know this if you're going to purchase this game. It's pretty much just you. And what I mean by that is, you may think, oh, I'm out in the wilderness, I'm going to run into, death-defying situations where there's animals and stuff coming after me. Never happens. And even though there's even allusions to things like there may be a bear, it never comes to fruition, and that may be very disappointing for someone who's going to buy a game just to find out it's just you wandering around by yourself. You should know that up front. Number two, playing this game on the PlayStation 4, more than halfway through the game, I encountered a really annoying, almost game-crippling game bug where my graphics were completely screwed up. There was this weird, second level of Earth that was on top of the ground, floating about maybe 5 feet above the ground, and it made it almost impossible to see where you were going. You had to constantly be using my map rather than just looking at the ground, because I couldn't see the trail because of this mysterious Earth that was floating. There were certain areas of the game where there were just, looks like giant mounds of crap. The lake looked like it was full of turds. I'm not making this up. You can see for yourself. I don't know what happened in this PS4 version of the game, but that is a huge graphical issue, and it stuck around even through repeated restarts of my console until I finally went to the next day of the story. So basically an hour of gameplay visually looked terrible, and that's a huge game bug that should have been caught out. In addition, the game doesn't run at a consistent frame rate on the PlayStation 4. It starts out in some parts at 60 frames per second, but they can chug to as low as 20 frames from my experience. I don't understand why they couldn't make it consistent. If it's consistently 30, great, but don't have it go high, low, high, low. It really is jarring and annoying when the only thing you're doing is walking around, and the game can barely even handle loading itself, so that the frame rate ends up plummeting into the toilet. And then ultimately, the major complaint most people have with this game: if you're not taking your time, if you're not talking with Delilah, radioing in and reporting everything that you discover throughout this wilderness, you could actually beat this game in under 2 hours. There was actually a speedrunner who beat it in about 90 minutes after he knew what to do from a first playthrough, because really all you need to do is go from point A to point B and back again, and there's really nothing else to do in the game. It's really about the exposition of the story, your relationship with Delilah as it gets more complicated, and flowers and cultivates. And if you don't do that portion of the game, you're going to end up flying through this game and beating it relatively quickly. So a playthrough can range as short as 90 minutes, or in my experience, really taking my time to go around and look for optional stuff to do, I played for around 5.5 hours. Whether or not you think that warrants the $20 price tag that they've put on this game is going to be your own personal choice. Some people are just obviously not interested in these walking simulators at all. They stay the hell away and want nothing to do with them. In this case, I thought there was enough of a story, enough of a mystery, and yes, I do want to say this as a final positive, the story actually had a definitive resolution. There's some of these games that have open-ended endings or no kind of real resolution at the end. No, this walking simulator did have a definitive story ending. A lot of people might not like that ending because the game is really just you walking around and you never really encounter anything else besides just the wilderness, but I really enjoyed the thriller story. I really enjoyed that aspect of the game, the interactions with Delilah. For me, I thought the game was worth it because I took my time with it, but if you're someone who's looking for this robust amount of gameplay and replayability, you're certainly not going to find it here with Firewatch. So now it comes down to my review score, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's difficult to express why I would rate Firewatch anything without telling you about the plot, because that's the meat of the game, but I don't want to spoil the plot for everyone. So it kind of sucks that I can't actually fully explain or back up what I'm saying in this review, because I would completely spoil the game for anyone who hasn't played it yet. But understand that I really did enjoy the story of Firewatch. I very much enjoyed the interactions with Delilah. I think that her character was very well written, and the dialogue in the game is one of the biggest things about the game that will grip you. So for those who actually purposely skip over the dialogue and don't talk to Delilah, I couldn't imagine them even liking the game. For me, I really enjoyed those interactions. I liked the visuals, and I liked a lot of things about the game. But of course, I also have to weigh that in with the fact that playing this on the PlayStation 4 gave me frame rate issues and huge graphical glitches that disturbed my playthrough, and for almost an hour of gameplay were very jarring and out of place, and that's unacceptable. Other people who played this on other versions, whether PC or Xbox One, may have had a better experience, but my review has to be based off of my personal experience with the game. So all factors considered, the positives and the negatives, I'm going to give Firewatch a 7.5 out of 10. There's some people who may completely disagree with me. That's perfectly okay, especially if you did play this on a different version and you think the game's a lot better. Or, on the flip side, if you just absolutely hate walking simulators that are based only off of dialogue and story and you were looking for something more, I completely understand. But from my experience, I really liked the game, but I can't credit it with being anything groundbreaking, with having any kind of massive replayability, because it doesn't, and the graphical glitches, in my opinion, really did affect my score. If those didn't happen, probably would have been maybe even a full point higher, but it is what it is. On the PlayStation 4, I give it a 7.5 out of 10. Well, that is it for the Hateful Truth review, everyone. I sure hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, please check out the video description below so that you can check out the entire full unedited playthrough of my Firewatch run over on my YouTube channel, DSP Gaming. In addition, please be sure to check out our Amazon Associates link as well as our Patreon at patreon.com/DarksidePhil. Thanks a lot as always for watching, and I'll see you next time on the Hateful Truth.